Hey y'all, hey, happy Monday. This is Dr. Heather Robinson here with Educators Rise Enterprises. I am trying something different for the first time, stepping out and trying something new. I have a couple of my co-authors that will be going live with me for interviews. We have joint forces as educators, leaders, advocates, mentors, you name it, across education to be part of an anthology. The anthology is the Educators Rise, Voices of Change. We are on volume 3, and that is due to launch on July 18th of this year. Let me show you. So this is volume 1. You guys see that? This actually was birthed in 2025. Came out April 25th, 2025. And then there was volume 2. This came out February of this year. We are now working on volume 3. So let me give you a little backstory. Sorry, someone is calling in. I'm doing these interviews because I want to give these authors the opportunity to share who they are. And the reason I want to do that is because I have some incredible people that I have linked arms with, and I'm waiting on my first guests to come. We're supposed to start at 1 o'clock, so we are just at 1 o'clock, so we're going to give him some grace. But while I'm doing that, I just wanted to share a little bit about what's happening. All right. First, we are having an in-person conference on July 18th. That's on a Saturday, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the Chester Spring area. It will be at the Hilton Gardens Inn. It's an Exton address, but I call it Chester Springs. And I am having a Juneteenth special. So if you're interested and you are in the Pennsylvania or surrounding area, please, you can DM me, you can drop a message under here and let me know that you're interested, and I will send you the information and let you know what that very, 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 very discounted Juneteenth rate is. Also, the book is going to be coming out. Volume 1 and Volume 2 are now on sale. They're live. Volume 3 is now actively live for purchase, but I will be shipping those out as they come because we will be launching July 18th. If you or anyone you know are interested in the book or the conference, let me know. How y'all doing today? How's it going? I feel like it's Monday, it's warm out, and I feel like some people are kind of either they're in their last week as educators in school, or they got out and they're still getting used to their break. So how y'all doing with the break and the change and how the school year ended? How do you feel about the school year? Do you feel it was a success? Do you feel like you were supported? How y'all feeling? I know there are some people that are at work right now. 1 p.m. is not really a time that a lot of people are free, unless at their job they're on their lunch break. But I did want to get on here, and I wanted to honor my guest, and I wanted to honor his time. And I am going to tell you a little bit about him. I am very excited that Minister, congratulations, by the way, Minister Phillip Lyde is our first guest. He was a part of the first volume, and he is a part of the third volume. And during the first annual conference that we had in June of 2025, his signature talk was phenomenal. His writing ability is ridiculous, and just his mindset of how he feels about education and advocating in education is really, really commendable. As a man, a black man in education, because unfortunately we don't have a lot of those. He also deals with special education. That takes a special type of human being. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit about him. I will bring him on and let him introduce himself. So let me get on here without further ado, I'm going to invite him on. And while I'm waiting for him to come on, I just want you guys to relax and enjoy. All right. He's coming in now.
Can y'all see me? Because I realized
We can't
that
see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, hold on. Let me. I told you I was going to jack this thing up.
No such thing. No, sir. This is technology at its finest.
Okay, can you see me now? Because I can see the camera, but I can't see you.
I can't see you, but I can hear you. Do
Okay.
you want to go out and try to come back in?
Yeah, let me try that.
All right. Let's try again. Sorry, guys. This is technology.
Okay, I'm up here, but I still don't see you.
I don't see you either.
Huh.
That's interesting.
Let me see.
Okay, I hear you very clearly, but I do not see you.
Okay, so it's showing on my computer. So I'm assuming that we can't see each other for whatever reason. But if you can hear me, however you want to do it.
That's
I'm
very
gonna move
weird.
my
That
phone on.
Are you on your phone or are you on your computer?
Well, the computer won't let me request to be on there for whatever strange reason. So I got on my phone. So I'm up here now.
That's very interesting that you're not able to come on the camera.
Let me see.
Guys, this is what happens when you try something new for the first time. Thank you for those that are on. Well, while you were trying to do that, do you want to take a few moments to introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Say it one more time because it's showing on the computer, but it's not showing on my phone. That's weird.
While we are dealing with the technical difficulties, do you want to share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. First of all, let me just say thank you for having me, Dr. Robinson. It's an honor as usual. Um, for those who may not know, my name is Phillip Lyde. I'm one half of Team Lyde. Eheys Consulting Solutions LLC. I by trade I am a EC teacher and a consultant. This past year, coincidentally, was my first time ever doing K through 3 self-contained. And I really enjoyed it. It really gave me a joy back into education. My whole background has always been education, middle school, high school. So I now have experience K through 12 with specialized in general populations. I've written a couple of books with my wife. I've also, as you discussed earlier, I was a part of the first volume of the anthology series, Educators Rise, as well as I did write the foreword to volume 2. So here I'm back again for volume 3, and I'm just excited to be here.
Very excited to have you. Yes, you have a very impressive background. And I don't know that there's enough time to go into his entire background because he has a very impressive background. He's being modest, but I have a few questions because I don't want to tarry and I don't want to keep you long because it's still early in the day, but I have a few questions that I did want to ask. So Here we are. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, you spent decades supporting students with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I said was impressive because you are a Black male in education. What initially inspired your passion for special education?
I don't know if I was more inspired than I felt a sense of obligation, you know, because just being transparent, EC or special education is very challenging, you know. I think what wound up happening was I was working, I got out of the military, I was doing a couple of things, and I swore off education completely. I wasn't going back to teaching. Coincidentally, I had
Mhm.
went into the military after I had began teaching, and I got burnt out. And I didn't think I was making a difference. Got out, sold cars, did a couple other things, and wound up
Mhm.
finding myself in level 3 group homes. During that time, I started seeing former students, and I really appreciated that. And so, going from level 3 group homes to eventually day treatment to alternative high school, back into the middle school and elementary school side in special needs was based off of just that progression was based off of really understanding that it was my obligation and my responsibility to make a better impact than one I was seeing as a parent, and two as an educator, you know, one of the few males in this particular space, understanding that if I didn't do it, who else would? And that's not
Right.
try to impress anybody. It was really like, okay, why isn't at the on the local level, why don't we have higher degreed educators? You know, why don't we have PhD candidates, and why don't we have master's level candidates in the school system, the K through 12, where they really needed that? And I wanted to be a part of that.
Those are some valid questions. And to even add to that, why don't we have more men in general, and black and
Right.
brown men specifically in education today, where when I was a child, there were more.
Right.
Um, hmm, wow. So looking at your leadership roles, because you've had multiple throughout education, what is it that really influences your why?
It sounds cliche, but I would say the children. Like I said, this is my first year doing K through 3 self-contained. So, one, I had a group that was probably larger than the space that I had. I had 13 kids, up to about 16 kids throughout the school year. And just to paint a picture, out of those 13 kids, 12 of them were autistic. You had about 9 kindergartners, three um, three first graders, and 1 second grader at the time. The second grader was ID mild. And to understand the nuance of autistic, you know, spectrum disorder, it's almost like you would have to plan for 13 separate cases or 13 separate lesson plans. So the work was daunting in itself. But I noticed that, one, this was some of the best sleep I got in years. You know, I come home exhausted. And I appreciated it because I was like, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment. Maybe I need to come back. But it wasn't until the parents started telling me that they noticed that their child's, most of them were partially and nonverbal as well. I even had to do some potty training and things like that. But when the parents were coming back to me, because I don't fit the profile, I'm not, I guess, your typical elementary school level teacher. Being a male on top of that, I was the only male who was a certified teacher on the K2 hallway. And usually that's not something that you would generally see, you know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 TAs, and for the most part, we worked well because I think there was a balance between having a male and a female in there. When the parents came back saying that they have seen their children do things that they hadn't done ever, you know, in a lot of cases, because some of them were coming with pre-K deficiencies. And so they're now learning and trying to speak more, um, and do things that they probably were not task to do in their previous school
Right.
was why I kept going back. And I'm enjoying it. So I plan on going back next year as well.
Wow. The biggest thing that stood out to me is just what you said. Like, you, from the outside looking in, people don't see you as fitting the mold, right? Because now
Right.
when you think of elementary or early childhood education, you think of women. It is a
Right.
predominantly female field right now, and I'm not sure if it's education related, if it's pay related, if it's a mixture of both, or if there's just a lack of interest. But there is definitely a deficit there. So what you're doing is major. We need you. Keep at it,
Thank you.
please.
I appreciate it.
Now, with the anthology that we're doing, this question
Mhm.
kind of goes into that. I had to write this down. The word equity is often used in education today.
Right.
What does equitable access to education truly mean for students with disabilities?
That's actually a good question because you often hear people use it almost as a misnomer when they try to say, well, we want equity, and their intentions are really just equality, right? Or
Mhm.
affirmative action. And like I said in the first anthology, I used to think that DEI was about equality. And for the longest time, most people in our space have been fighting or putting our ladders up the wrong wall, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at equity from the standpoint of in education, what you got to look at, like for instance, in North Carolina, schools get a report card every year. I don't know if they do that in any other states. And what happens is each school gets a grade system based off of proficiency as well as growth.
Hmm.
Now, if you're familiar with the educational system, you know that there are a couple of key factors that play a part in how a child is exposed to their academic achievement, right? Or exposed to the level of rigor that's required on state assessments and standardized tests and progress monitoring and things of that nature. But my background has been primarily Title One schools. Title One schools are schools where 80 to 90% of the kids get free or reduced lunch. So that lets you
Hmm.
know the social economic disparities that are there between, say, a child who goes to maybe a more homogenous school, right? Where it might be an all male private boarding school, or it might be a Christian based or religious based school versus a Title One public school. And the interesting thing about that is there's really no equity. There's
Hmm.
equality because of federal law, right? But there's no equity. And by that, and especially with special ed populations, one of the things I really appreciate my principal on is the fact that she's always tried to create opportunities for my kids to be inclusive in the space, whether it was assemblies, award ceremonies, whether it was just small things like they would try to celebrate these kids as often as possible. And I really appreciated that because you don't often see that. And what I look at now in terms of what equity looks like is that you're giving each and every child what they need, not necessarily what the state wants or what the school culture wants, but you're giving that child what they need based off of their capacity to grow. For some kids, like for a lot of my kids, it was potty training routines. It was let's write in everything that we do, right? Because um, one of the things I come to understand is that writing, the capacity to write is your
Hmm.
ability to provide evidence of how you're able to learn and grow. And not accepting what some folks would say, even on the state level, oh, these kids have disabilities. we're not expecting them to learn anything until December. This is September, October. And I'm saying, well, I can't afford that time because these parents have trusted me to take care of their children. So equity has to be looked at from the perspective of knowing what that child needs, knowing what your capacity is and what your identity is as the adult, as the role model, and then from there proceeding to formulate a relationship that is inclusive, that is conducive for their growth, not just academically, but behaviorally and functionally, etc.
Very good. This actually rolls over into advocacy. A lot of what you do is deeply rooted in advocacy. So this is the two-part question. The first part is, what are ways that you think would help parents to better advocate for their children? And then on the flip side of it, what are the challenges that the families actually face when trying to advocate for their children with special needs?
Okay. Let me start with the second question first, with the end in mind. I think the biggest challenge that many of the parents face is the fact that there's an assumptive position that both the school and the parents take when it comes to special needs populations. For instance, one of the things that I heard throughout the school year is that, oh, this child didn't do this at their old school, or they don't have these set of boundaries set in place at home, or I just give my child whatever they want so I don't have to hear them stimming or being overstimulated rather. And so we also, as educators, take this assumptive approach when even communicating with parents. We assume that parents are doing the best jobs that they can, that parents have it all together. And let's be honest, they're just as flawed and fractured and dysfunctional and broken just like the rest of us. We also assume that as educators on the flip side, that we have it all together, that we're perfect, that we are the end all to be all, and we're just as flawed and broken and dysfunctional as everybody else. And so when you put that all together, you have almost like a perfect storm where the child is now being impacted on both ends, at home and at school, by dysfunctional adults who are, one, not able to communicate, because oftentimes we in the school system, and I talk to this with parents all the time during IEP meetings, is that the IEP team is not a us versus you type of paradigm. Equity in the IEP team, for instance, is mom, dad, you all have the same amount of say, position, and authority in the decision of your child's academic process as everybody else here. Just because I work with your child in the school setting does not discount the fact that this is your child. And I think that's oftentimes misunderstood because parents usually have a poor perception of what it's like, and they stereotype all school settings, especially in a Title I setting. As far as advocacy go, the biggest thing that we could do as a community at large is communicate with one another. Find out what the backstory or the story is to that child and the family so that we can best serve their needs. If you know that a child is behaving at a certain time during the day and it's obvious that he's showing patterns, that he's disruptive, and he's not being malicious or he's not being a detriment to himself or to other student populations, then let's find out more about the student. Let's not just think that education starts from 7:30 and ends at 3:30 in the evening. Because anybody who's had children, whether you have your own children as a parent or whether you've worked in this space, you know that teaching is not what they try to gloss over in society. We don't get holidays. We don't get weekends. We don't get summer breaks. We're always constantly, if you really care, we're always constantly looking to find ways to best serve the needs of our children. So in terms of advocacy, I had to tell a parent this recently. We're all advocates. It's no different than being a mandatory reporter if you saw a child being abused, if you saw a child being possibly exploited, right? Or even trafficked. We're also advocates in trying to fight for the needs of that child. Hey, look, this child needs clothes. This child needs their clothes washed, or this child needs XYZ. This family doesn't have any, we're social workers, we're therapists, we're fathers, we're mothers, we're aunts, uncles, on top of being educators. We're also disciplinarians, instructors, and when we take on the position of providing a culture that's inclusive of all the stakeholders of that child, then we become a family in which we can cooperate and develop that child in a way that's more positive than what they're seeing outside of the school. That was probably a long way of saying what I needed to say, but
No, that was really good. It actually made me think about the days of old where it takes a village to raise a child. And we've
right,
gotten so far away from that, where you were talking about IEP teams. It used to be your administrators, your educators, your IEP teams, and your families came together as that
right.
village for that one child to help them get from where they were to their next milestone or to where they needed to be. And we've gotten so far away from that for many reasons. You have reasons on the education end, reasons on the administrative end, reasons on the
Mhm.
parent end. Sometimes parents are in denial. Sometimes they feel like their child is being attacked or labeled before anything is even being done because of
Right.
communication or lack thereof. You have teachers that feel overwhelmed and they don't feel like they have the support of the administration team. You have the administration team with their hands tied. How do we get back to it takes a village to raise a child, where the parents don't feel like they have to be so defensive when it comes to their children, where the teachers don't feel so helpless, and where the administrators don't feel like their hands are tied because of higher up?
I think the short answer would be ownership. We each have to be accountable for one another. There's going to be a disconnect somewhere along the line when somebody says, you can't talk to my child that way, or you can't talk to me that way, right? And oftentimes the truth hurts. And sometimes we don't want to have the hard conversations here in the school system simply because we're scared, oh, they might do a state complaint, and now we got a lawsuit we got to deal with. The county that I work in right now, they talk about litigation as if it's normal. And I told them, I said, this is not, and I told them this on the district meeting last year this time, this is not normal. It's not normal for you to be talking about lawsuits with lawyers and with um, audits and things like that because someone else has done, because this has become common to accept. And I'm not saying that there is no legitimate reason for it. There are legitimate reasons to do a state complaint.
Mm-hmm.
However, how many people have actually spoke to the parents, have spoke to the caregivers, have spoke to the guardians, right? How many of us have really gone out of our way instead of turning off our ringers after 3:30? How many of us will still accept emails or calls from a parent? My school ended on the 3rd. A parent calls me on the 4th for a situation that had nothing to do with me per se, but it does. Again, because it's ownership. She calls me up and she's asking me about her child's character because there was an accusation at the daycare he was at. And I told her, I said, I can't tell you that it hasn't been done, but my question would be, you know, let's find out what some of the, what questions do we need to ask without judging anybody or without accusing anybody falsely. But at the same time, as a parent, you have peace of mind knowing that your child is still safe. And so I talked her through it, with her maybe about hour and a half or so, because even though I was not on the clock per se, ownership, like I was saying, has to extend past what is in your job description, because your
Right.
job description does not account for many of the nuances that I was saying earlier about when schools get those report cards. Excuse me, in North Carolina, failing schools might exceed growth levels, but most of the kids are not proficient. Why? Because they might not have been exposed to it, or they have not developed a culture or a discipline to create the habits of loving to learn. Yeah, loving to learn, right? And what we're finding out is that 80% is based off of proficiency. But if I'm at a Title I school, chances are the other 20%, which is growth, kids are meeting those needs within their capacity, but they're failing miserably in catching up with their other peer groups. And that's and part of that is due to no fault of their own, right? And so when we look at these things in terms of ownership, when I talk about my kids, I'm not talking about the 13 that I have in my classroom, because it's easy to be insular. We have to say that, okay, all 400 kids in this school are my kids. If I see you at Food Lion or Walmart, I'm not going to try to avoid you out in public because I don't like you. First of all, no adult should not hold grudges against children, but that's another conversation. But I think in order for us to get back to it takes a village, we all have to be serious about the work that we do, because biblically it's about stewardship and not about authority and domination or control.
Yeah, that was well said. And it made me think about something a little birdie told me about you and your company. I don't know if you the cat's out the bag yet, but something's supposed to be developing down the pipe. Are we sharing about that? Because it ties right into what you were saying with that parent calling you, even though school ended on the 3rd and they called you on the 4th and they got an answer and they also got the support they needed. Let's tie that in.
Right, and thank you for mentioning that, because I think that for me, and I had to tell a couple teachers, a couple of coworkers that you have to set high expectation for these kids. Like, I really don't care what a child's story is to the extent of whether or not I can teach them or whether or not they can learn. I don't care about your backstory, because if you come through the doors of my classroom, I'm going to get you together. I'm going to discipline you in love, but I'm going to set the bar high enough to where you're going to reach up for that bar. I'm not setting it any lower because I feel sorry for you. And so one of the things that I was doing, that I'm developing, is a mobile app to where parents can save themselves time, energy, and resources along with the school system, to where they can look at their child, because they know their child in one capacity. The school could also look at their child and say, okay, there's a pattern of behavior that's forming. And they can go to this app and they can actually do an assessment about their child without any sensitive information being given, to where they can determine whether or not they need either more supports in the classroom, they need to do more intensive support, such as an EC services, or maybe occupational therapy or speech, which are your student support services, or do they need more structures and rules in the classroom, because it falls back on the teacher under those universal supports? Because a lot of times parents get, oh, I need an IEP. My child needs an IEP. And if the data doesn't support that, your child will be denied. And and then what some parents will do, a very small few will do, they'll take their child out of my school, go to another school in hopes of getting that IEP, getting those supports in place. And so what I'm developing now, it's finished, it just needs to be polished up, right? So what I'm doing now is developing this app so that parents can get the peace of mind of knowing that, look, I have data that supports my inquiry about a referral. Do I need a referral, or can I go to a parent-teacher conference and say, look, are these supports being put in place? Because these are the parents I'm seeing at home based off of my child's report card and disciplinary actions. And are you seeing those same things? And maybe we can get together more as a team rather than us trying to have a volleyball tournament or a tennis match in terms of who has the right to say what or who has the power and authority to say this. And I tell parents, I tell all my parents this, we have to look at this more like a marriage rather than like single parenthood. Because
Mm-hmm.
typically what happens is, or a blended family, right? So where typically what happens is the rules at your house may not apply to my rules in my house. And so the child is often confused whenever they go back to the other parent. So I tell parents, we have to look at this as you're married to us, and what we're going to do in this process is make sure that we, one, identify that your child has these needs in being in this particular setting. It's called the least restrictive environment. If we're just putting kids in there based off of one identifier, say behavior, then that's not the least restrictive. It would be more restrictive because this child can learn. This child is on grade level. This child can read and write and add and subtract. Now we need to find out what that professional is doing in order to add more small group structures, maybe extended time, maybe give that child an opportunity to process what you're saying for them
Mm-hmm.
before they respond. Because we're so quick to demand an answer right away, and then we get upset when a child doesn't take his time on an assessment. I don't understand that. It's hypocritical at best. But yes, the app, a long way of saying it, right? The app will definitely give parents, school systems a preliminary idea in terms of what's next. Because it's going to cost schools thousands of dollars, I'll say even tens of thousands of dollars each year when they get inundated with parent referrals and the data doesn't
Mm-hmm.
support it. So this would be the first step for all of that.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were talking about that yet, but I felt like the way this conversation was going, that was a really good segue into that because
Oh,
that's going to contribute to getting back to it takes a village to raise a child because you
mhm.
have everything right there at everybody's fingertips. So no one can
Right,
say this fell between the tracks or this
right.
fell the cracks, not the tracks, if you will. Wow. Yeah, I think that's going to be a game changer in education for real. So keep
I
at it.
appreciate it.
Now
Definitely.
you've done a really good job of articulating where you stand as far as DEI is concerned within the Educator's Rise anthology for Volume 1 and Volume 3. What inspired your yes to give that type of a story to this? Because Volume 1, if you remember, came out before all of the mess started.
Right,
I,
right,
I didn't I did not know that all of this like I didn't know that all of this was going to turn into what it turned into.
right.
It was something that I held on to for a couple of years before I actually stepped out on faith and did it. I'm glad we did, but what has that yes turned into for you? If you allow me to ask it that way.
Yeah. If you remember, initially I didn't know what to expect because I was ignorant to DEI, and I had almost dismissed it as being another platform for affirmative action, right? But once you
Mm-hmm.
invited me to do the first volume, I wound up understanding a lot more to it, and now it's interesting how I'm seeing more of it play out in the schools that I serve. Like I said, I'm used to Title I schools, and
Yeah.
from last year this time to this year, I've had the honor of teaching in two different settings. I'm back in the Title I school now, but prior to, I was doing EC consulting for a failing school. It was still a failing school, but the average home price in the area is about $700,000. So these people, social economically, were to do people, right? golf course, brand new Teslas, all this good stuff. But they were still failing. And what I noticed was that the environment did not matter, because at the end of the day, the environment or the social economic environment was probably more reflective of the parents than it was the children. So when I saw that both kids who were in the upper middle class to higher level incomes versus the kids who were in the lower areas, the lower economic statuses, and they had the same exact needs, that made me say, you know what? This is still just as relevant now as it was before. And even with everything going on, I looked at it as it's even more of an essential need today than it was a couple years ago. Simply because now people who probably have been arguing about race or religion in terms of what DEI stood for are now having to see, wait a minute, this also impacts me. This also impacts my relationships with other people. Now I have to dig deep. Instead of thinking that my relationships are transactional, now I have to dig deep and figure out, who do I become in the process? It's all about identity. And my yes to this volume was like, it just makes more sense that we have to continue to, all the authors on this book, we have to continue to speak loud and speak boldly in our conviction on this. Yes. Because this is not just this is not a political thing. This is not a racial thing. This is not even a social economic thing. And I think if you look at the law, in the law books, it's a ministerial thing. We have a ministerial obligation to serve one another, despite what their backgrounds are, despite where they come from. If a child has a need, I think I'm pretty decent enough to where I can fulfill that need. If they're, you know what I'm saying, and help them become better than who they were when they first met.
It's interesting you said that, because I just ended out the school year on Friday.
Wow.
And I worked in early childhood education for 23 years in the classroom. I guess this is what you call retirement from the classroom.
Right.
I started young, but I'm not like retired from education. It's just from the classroom. And one of the takeaways that I had was, as I move into my next, when I did my dissertation on DEI, and then I delved deep into equity versus equality, and how when you move in equity in your classroom, you see better results in your individual students.
Right.
Students that came to me that they didn't even know the first letter in their name, by the end of the year can identify letters out of sequence, letter sounds, words that start with the letter. We would do write the room when you were talking about writing. That resonated with me, because I remember telling a class that was a step up from me to start doing write the room with their students. And you'll see a difference, because everybody doesn't learn the same. Sitting right here stationary at a desk all day, although that's the standard, that's not how we all learn. And so allowing children to get up and walk the room and identify letters, numbers, words, or whatever it is that you're teaching them, and then to be able to write that down, that stimulates their mind and their body. And I feel like a lot of times, like you said, we merge the two, and they're on two totally different sides of the spectrum. And DEI is so much bigger than being in this box that everybody's trying to put it in. You know, when people talk about movements, DEI is a movement, and that it's bigger than any one thing, right? And so meeting the needs of individual students, that's something that was supposed to always be in the schools. That's something that was supposed to always be with parent to child. And that's something that was supposed to always be in the church and the community. Somehow we
Right.
got away from it. I mean, I have my speculations, but those are the things that if we kind of stand flat-footed and keep going, those are some of the things that it'll prick the heart of those that think DEI is just another, like you said, it's just another civil rights movement. It's just another 40 acres and a mule. It's just another, this one's complaining about this and complaining about that and wanting things on a golden platter. No, I don't want anything on a golden platter. I
Right.
want all of my students to be able to move to their next without there being anything that hinders them. So if you teach pre-K and your students are moving to kindergarten, they
Mhm.
need to be able to move and transition without anything hindering them. There shouldn't be something that hindered them because there was something that fell between the cracks because we wanted this cookie cutter way for the classroom
Right.
to look, or we wanted this year's class to look like last year's class. That's unrealistic and it's unfair.
Right.
So I'm really, really glad that you gave a yes, but I'm also glad that you're doing this app. So it kind of is just like, it's amazing how things are going full circle with this. And one of the first conversations we had when we met before you gave your yes, all of this is full circle for me.
Yeah.
So with that said, because of your expertise, looking ahead in the next 5 years, and that when you think about it, that's not really a long time. 5 years happens really swiftly. What
Right.
changes would you like to see in education as it pertains to students with disabilities? What's the trajectory you would like to see in the next 5 years?
Okay. So this is not a coincidence that you asked that question because I just told my principal maybe about month ago, that and I was being somewhat facetious, but I'm still serious about it. Had if I ever was to win the lottery, so to speak, right? Because we've all had that conversation. If you won $1 million, what would you do with it, right? So I've often said that in the next 5 years, because the money is there, it
Mm-hmm.
gets redirected to other areas, which is another fight for another day. But I think in terms of what we're talking about right now,
Yeah.
especially with special needs populations, I would want to see more sensory resources put in place, um, as well as a stronger emphasis on those four quadrants: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So even your nonverbal kids, there are tools that they can use to become more verbal, right? Um, I think because nobody told me not to do it, I was quick in, and it helped me with the rapport with the students. I was quick to always tell my nonverbals, believe it or not, or my partial verbals, use your words. Tell me what you're saying. Point to it. You know what I'm saying? Do those things. And it even inspired me to go ahead and start thinking about learning ASL, American Sign Language. And one of the things that we did all year long with the repetition was, even when they were going over their phonetic awareness or their letter identification or their letter sounds, I would still have the ASL equivalent to it. And by the end of the year, more kids were able to do basic, you know what I'm saying, signs,
Mm-hmm.
even if it was just a couple letters out of the alphabet. And these are things that they had not done before. I had a parent just tell me that she noticed that her child will actually become dysregulated if she does not do the little wiggle dance that we do during our brain breaks before she comes to school. So she'll do the little wiggle dance or whatever it is, eat breakfast, and then she comes to school. And she has to do it. And I thought that was interesting. The next 5 years will look like the last 5 years if we don't take more ownership over our kids. If we don't, if we walk into the school systems and we're saying this is just a job, you know, and it goes back to the point earlier about what you said. What does it take to be a village? Um, we need protectors. We need nurturers. We need leaders. We need teachers, right? We also need people who are solid and knowledgeable to where they're saying, I'm going to get this done by any means necessary. I think we have too many conditions under which we'll teach nowadays. And so the next 5 years will look like the last 5 years if we don't change that perception. If we don't change the school culture to say we're not accepting anything from anybody and we're taking a stronger stance on how you look, how you respond, how you behave, how you speak to one another, and how we speak to you. And it's all because of love, right? And so one of the things that I've learned more recently than not is that the whole purpose for discipline is for reconciliation. Where can we help these kids at on an emotional level, right? Because going to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, rather, if we cannot fulfill the base, food, clothing, shelter, water, we can't even get them to a place of safety. Then from there, we can't even show them that we love them. And we want to use, I'm using that as a rudimentary example simply because many of us don't even look at that. Many of us don't even recognize that our own children are probably hungry or even starving in our classrooms, and this is why they behave the way that they do. We're not even understanding that some of our kids come in and you open up their book bags and it smells like marijuana, right? Or cigarettes. So bad that you don't that you don't create the imagery of the fact that they're in an environment where this is really impacting them in a way that's counterproductive to what you're expecting in the classroom. And I just learned this year, for anybody who didn't know, is that I thought that, for instance, we'll take the marijuana. I thought it would mellow you out like it does most adults, but with a child that has ADHD or autism, it actually ramps up their hyperactivity. So that's how I knew if my children were under the influence, because they'll be zipping back and forth all day until they start crashing. And that's when we saw the behaviors, you know? So overall, over the next 5 years, ideally, I would love to see more resources put into the school system for special needs. I'm doubtful of it only because so many people have benefited from the resources of special needs populations. You know, that December 1st and that April 1st head counts worth a lot of money to certain schools. And unfortunately, if schools don't take the approach of prioritizing EC first, then your general ed kids, we're going to continue to have the same cycles, the same gaps in learning as we've been having for the past 20, 30 years. When I argued this back in probably 97, when I asked them, why do we even have a grading system if most kids are not performing on grade level? And if you don't find out where they can be instructed in their instructional levels or their capacity to learn, then what we're doing is we're just filling up that pipeline, right? And it's not necessarily a school to prison pipeline. It might just be a school to group home pipeline, or even a school to, I don't know, a school to unemployment pipeline. Without the skill sets, without the emotional intelligence, without the ability to do just be functionally illiterate. Because I don't think we have that like we used to.
Wow. You said something that made me think of what we've been going over in Bible study. You talked about restoration. And my pastor always says it takes repentance to get the restoration.
Right.
And then when you break down repentance, I always say repentance was to turn away from something and never go back to it. But my pastor breaks it down a little more clearer. He says you turn away from one thing to another, right? And so when you talk about students coming in under the influence versus not, the restoration piece would be to put the influence down and turn to something else. What could that something else be? That something else could be, like you said, that one student who has to do that wiggle dance. That's turned into something else. It could be
Right.
reading a book. It could be meditating. It could be going for a quick walk. You have to give something up. It's like putting off something and putting something else on so that
Right.
you can get to that point of restoration. And I feel like on a broader sense with the schools, you have to put off this belief that all students are the same and put on the understanding that every individual student is different.
Right.
And I feel like that's where students no longer are a number on December 1st and April 1st, but they become a priority. So
Right.
that's something that stuck out to me.
I
My
agree.
my final question to you, with everything that you've done and
Mhm.
all of your expertise, what is one final word of encouragement that you would give to educators, leaders, teachers, advocates, parents, surrogates, aunts, uncles, whoever are involved in a children's upbringing or their village that we're trying to get back to?
Um, that's a good question. I want to say set your expectations high. Don't accommodate what you know is wrong, but provide a level of grace to where the child knows and feels that you love them.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, even scripturally, you understand that God only disciplines or God chastens those who he loves. So if a child
Yeah.
is not getting discipline or correction, and discipline is not punitive, it's probably not what we were accustomed of getting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go outside into the street, almost get hit by a car. Instead of understanding that lesson, you probably got a whooping, right? Did
Mm-hmm.
not tell you. But we have to model these things, these expectations. It don't matter what you think they know. You know that they know, right? And so as parents, anybody who serves children, my one thing I would say that stands out is provide grace. Look for opportunities to provide grace to them. Yeah, they could be cutting up a fool all day, every day, 10 times a day. But that 11th time, just say, you know what? We're gonna try something different. And don't give them the same response that they're accustomed to, you know? And I think that helps because at some point, whether you see it in your lifetime or not, that child will get it. I think that's the one thing I am confident in is that regardless of a child's disability, they'll get it eventually. It's just
Mm-hmm.
going to be more of a challenge for you to figure out different ways to getting it to them. And you have to keep doing it. You can't stop, right? Victory doesn't go to the strong or the swift, but to those who endure to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no different here. If you definitely consider yourself anybody in the capacity of serving others, this is what God is expecting you to do. He don't care nothing about nothing else. He wants to know, did you feed his sheep? Only you can answer that.
That's powerful. Well, Minister Phillip, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I'm
I
still
thank you
trying
so
to get
much.
used to
I'm going to
it.
keep calling you it. I thank you so much for your yes. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your dedication, putting your hand to the plow, rolling your sleeves up, getting your hands dirty to get in there, and just to ensure that the students that are in your care feel loved, valued, seen, and heard. Because if we could start with our inner, right? You start within your school first and then
Right.
step out. You start within your household first and then step out of that. Then that's where we'll see the real transformation take place and the real reconciliation that we're looking for in education
Mm.
take place.
Right.
Real quick, tell them how they can contact you if they need to for consulting and any and everything else that you do, all things education.
I'm probably better via text, so I'll give that for people unless you have those nighttime minutes still. I'm not sure. But anybody can text me or call me 919-758-3329 or my social media platforms. On Instagram, it is Team Lyde Official. TikTok, it is I am Mr. Lyde. And even on Facebook, you can just look up my name, Phillip L. Lyde. And then just, I think, email. I'm not as good with email, especially during the day, but yeah, any of those platforms are probably the best way to reach me. Even if my ringer is off, I could actually check to see if somebody sent me a message. But, anything I can do to serve anybody or help anybody, I'm a firm believer that information is free and that we have to do this together because one person is not enough.
Absolutely. If you guys want to link arms with Minister Phillip, he just gave you all his information. It will also be in the comments. I want to thank everyone for coming out to join the first Educators Rise Facebook Live interview. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but I want you guys to still hear what he had to say because he is a wealth of knowledge. And be sure to be on the lookout for our launch of Volume 3 of the Educators Rise, which is the Change Anthology, and our in-person conference, which will be on Saturday, July 18th, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Hilton Garden Inn in Exton, PA. For more information, you can drop either in the comments or you can DM me. Remember, when educators rise, students rise, communities rise, and futures rise. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye.
God bless you. Thank you.